Now we're uncredible.
Welcome to the Uncredible Podcast. My name's Jeremy, and I'm Uncredible. So we're playing around with a little bit of a different setup today. If you see me looking up here, I'm trying to run my notes from up here and the actual studio, so to speak, from here. And I always like to share with you guys the behind the scenes of figuring things out. And one of the things I wanted to share with you today was yesterday on the Substack, I should say on the Substack, it was actually on Substack in general, I got an invite to do a live stream with Craig Lewis's Running Tales. Now, I featured him on the podcast a couple of times in the past and really appreciate his show. If you haven't checked it out, I highly encourage you, go check it out. He does great work. He really has a very similar audience and focus as I do. So, and that focus and audience is average people doing crazy. I don't know what his tagline is. Mine's average people doing incredible things, but he looks at average runners and really hones in on just the challenge that it is to just do this running thing. And so his is called Running Tales. And he asked me to be on the show. It was a perfect lineup. We had a great live stream. It went great, except for the fact that he forgot to hit, I guess, go live on his side. I was the guest, so I didn't see the go live. But we had a great conversation. It was so similar to, I'm now 3 interviews in a row. My first recording with Daryl Perry, we didn't record it just because we were having a good conversation, getting to know each other. That one was intentional. So there was no issue there. That's just the way it played out. And then 2 weeks ago, I interviewed Chad Williams and forgot to hit the record button on my side. And then yesterday, I go to do a live stream with Craig Lewis. And honestly, I think for the most part, Substack was holding up. He might have had some connection issues. I was running everything from my studio here, and I could see what was going on. It seemed like it was working. I guess there's just a point on his side where he should have hit go live, but he was using the Substack app and didn't see that button. So I'm not sure what happened on his end. But keep an eye out for that, because we're gonna probably repeat that here in a couple weeks and give it another shot. But this whole technology thing, it's a challenge, and I'm starting to think a little bit that I'm kind of like a curse to other people's podcasts, because now I'm three different people, and the initial interview failed. So apologize to him for cursing his show. He's probably feeling pretty rough about it, but it's no worries. Those of us who are trying to do this podcast thing is no different than anybody who's trying to do the running thing. We're not elite. We're figuring it out as we go. What I will say is I liked what I saw from the live feed side of Substack. When I did my interview with Chad Williams, I didn't like the fact that I had to have a countdown and it was limited to 40 minutes. So I am glad that I can probably go to Substack Live and maybe start doing my interviews that way, and then do them live so people can watch them when they happen. So the only challenge to that is going to be, sorry, I got an eyelash and I can't get it out. There it goes. Good night. Jeez, I'm staying uncredible here. The only challenge to that is I think the person who I'm interviewing would have to have a Substack account, but I don't think that's a terrible thing either. I think encouraging people to get on the Substack and be a part of it, share their stories, it's kind of in line with what we're trying to do anyway. So it's this technology thing is fun, trying to learn it, trying to be a podcaster. I've thought about pairing up with some of these people that I've interviewed with to just have a podcast, like where we talk about the struggles and challenges, because like if you listen to any professional podcast, you'll probably hear people say like, oh, go to slide 3 or go to this clip, and they just have to be the guy who sits here and talks, and they've got someone else running the behind the scenes, which has its own challenges, because if that person doesn't pull up the right clip, then that can be a problem too. But in this case, being the podcaster, producer, putting all the clips together, doing the whole thing, it's a challenge, and sometimes the technology just doesn't work. But I did want to say a big thank you to Craig Lewis for having me on the podcast. We had a great conversation. Like I said, our audiences and the people that we try to promote are pretty much the same. We look at athletes who are just average people and really try to. We had a really good conversation about I think it would be beneficial if people, uncredible people, got more and more of the fanfare. It's not like the thing is, it's not about like the popularity of it. It's more the idea that, I look at somebody who's elite, like the guy who just recently set the record for the marathon in a sub 2 hour marathon. I think it's like Elia Chobi. I'm butchering his name. It doesn't matter. But like, he's incredible. And when you look at that, you go, wow, that's an amazing feat. But then you also, in the back of your mind, you're kind of like, I could never do that. And what stories like the ones that Craig shares on his Running Tales and things that I talk about here, I hope that it brings that back into a world where it's like, I can do that. Like, I might not be able to do what he did, but I can do what I can do. And we Craig and I had a great conversation. It didn't get recorded. It happens. He and I will probably touch base again. I told him I've got a marathon next week, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But I've got my marathon next week. Maybe something will happen where where I do well or I do terrible, either way. And we can talk about that the following week or something. But he's gonna have me on again at some point. I could see us connecting, especially if we can figure out the Substack live stream. I think that's something he and I could hop on and do fairly regularly if he wanted to. It's up to him. But with that said, I want to jump into the Substack and look at what's coming next week. And if you're following the Substack at all, this week, my schedule with the Substack is, just flipped my mouse by accident. I want to try to have the book preview come out on Monday, the clips come out on Thursday, which is kind of like a throwback thing, and then Wednesday be the new article with the podcast over the weekend. Haven't been able to be too successful with all of those. I've been able to get like some of them. Like this week, I missed the clips, but I was able to get the article and the chapter for the book. But it's like, it seems like one thing always falls behind. And the week before that, I got a whole bunch of clips out, but I wasn't able to get like an article or a chapter of the book out. So it's like a back and forth kind of thing with me. But next week I do have an article, and it's going to be, let's see if this will work. There we go. It's an article called Halfway to the Holidays Marathon. I can't read it from here. That's crazy. I don't know what the subtitle was. I just changed the subtitle to this before I started the episode. But yeah, basically I'm doing a preview. The unknown ahead. That's right. So in this article, I'm going to talk about how, in my first marathon, it was like, just finish it and hopefully somewhere in the 4s. I cramped up. Things didn't go the greatest and had to switch gears in both marathons, my first and second, and ended up with a 5 hour, just over 5 hour marathons. And was really disappointed in the Buffalo Marathon because I had trained for a 3:55. This time around, I'm hoping for anything under 5, which feels crazy to say out loud, but I'm fairly certain I'll do that. But man, even as I say that, I said something very similar to that when I was leading up to the Buffalo Marathon. But what I am looking forward to is this is going to be a fun marathon. The theme is halfway to the holidays, and it's I think I mentioned this last week, but I was looking at the route that I have to run. It's literally a down and back is a half marathon, then down and back again is the full. I like that because I hope it's going to help me ration my fuel and my water. I can really plan and know where I'm at. With my last two, I guess Presque Isle Marathon, it was 2 loops, so that was kind of similar. But I have been thinking about like strategy and my best performance in a race and really in practice as well. My best performance has been when I wear my water vest. So I actually have my water vest in the wash right now. I'm getting prepared for that. But currently I'm recording this on Saturday and I am literally 1 week away. So 1 week away. This is going to be a tough one because this is in Johnstown, Ohio, which is roughly, I think I've got it figured out to be about 4.5 hours. The race starts at 6:30 in the morning. So my son and I are going to have to leave around midnight. So this is one of those first marathons that's going to test my third shift capability. For those who don't know, I am a third shifter. I work night shift. And so one of the reasons I'm doing these overnight drives is so I don't have to stay in a hotel to do these races. If you don't know, I'm also chasing states, and Ohio is one of the states. So this will be my first marathon in Ohio. And I want to check that box, but in order to do it without staying in a hotel, we're going to have to drive roughly 5 hours. There'll probably be a stop or two in there. Get to the race start line at 6:30, and run the race. Probably be done. We'll just go based on the 5 hour trend that I'm doing. Probably be done around 11:30 or noon. With to drive all the way back, we'll be here by dinner time. So, but that'll be next Saturday. It's going to be a challenge. This will be the first one that we drive overnight, but I have another one. I have 3 races that I'm going to be driving over, actually 4, but this marathon, the following week, the following Sunday after this race, I'll be running a 10K in Little Miami, Ohio, so that will also be an overnight run. And then when I do the Marine Corps Marathon in October, I'm also going to be driving overnight, hitting the start line the morning of. So all of that's going to be a challenge, and I'm kind of looking forward to it, but I'm leveraging the fact that I am a third shifter to try to get away from having to do the hotel thing. So yeah, that's what's coming next week. This article is kind of like my preview of that race and what I'm thinking. And the truth is, I'm really not sure what to think in terms of like what's going to happen. I have no idea. Yeah, it's going to be tough. Hopefully next week we will have a chapter from the book, Uncredible the book. And I've just continued to be throwing these out there the best that I can. I'm running out of stuff that I've already written, so there's going to be some work involved there. And I can't guarantee this, but I will try to have some clips. I'll try to get the clips in there. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it or not, but I'll try to get the clips in next week. So we'll try to have some Uncredible clips going forward. What's really bothering me about the clips is the fact that, you know what I'm thinking about right now is I'm wondering if you guys can hear my mouse clicking with this microphone. Probably you can. Sorry about that. The thing with the clips is the past episodes, and I'm keep debating with myself if I should worry about that or not. Like, my ideal scenario would be to have clips from an earlier episode and the most recent, but I've already fallen behind on the most recent ones, and I think the most recent ones are the ones I should just focus on, and then as I get time, chase the historic ones. But, you know, I had a good week 2 weeks ago where I cranked out a whole bunch of clips. I think I did like 3 episodes. But then last week I was so kind of burnt out from doing the clips and other things going on. I'll share about that in the main topic. But other things that were going on at work, it was just like I just didn't have the motivation to jump on there and do clips. And it's not hard, it's just tedious. And that's the frustrating thing about the clips. You just got to get in there and do it and timestamp it. And then that was the other thing. So when I was thinking about doing clips, I went down this rabbit hole of having those, you know how some podcasts have like time-stamped links in their show notes? And I was like, I saw that on one of the podcasts. In fact, I'm going to talk about it in today's episode. There's a podcast that had that and it was really well organized. And I was like, how do I do that? And I went down that rabbit hole and I discovered that it's really not that hard to do. I just haven't been doing it. So that's also something I want to get built into the podcast, because I do love the idea of people being able to go, hey, I don't really care about what's on his Substack. You know, I don't care about this. We do this every week. Let's jump to the main topic or the news. I do like that idea. So all of that stuff that I'm thinking about, hopefully we can get there at some point. Let's see, what do I have next here? Oh, yeah. So we are on track number 3. I'm going to try to do this a little differently today. This particular track is, I hope this works. It should work. There we go. It's not playing yet, so that's good. Today's special track that I want to share is called The Cost. And initially, when I started building the Uncredible album, I had only like 4 songs. It was going to be like a 3 to 4 song thing. And then this song really got me thinking outside of the box in terms of what this thing could be. And I got really excited about it, and it turned into, whoops, see, there it goes. This is where it gets challenging trying to produce this myself. So this, I guess I could do that. No, I'll do that here in a minute. But The Cost is an emotional song. So the first song, The Uncredible, which we debuted 2 weeks ago, that song is more like a chant, or we are the Uncredible. Let's unify, and it's like, let's bring us all together. Evaluation is just sort of like the average worker looking at these people who evaluate him and going, who are you to evaluate me? Like, who do you think you are? And then when we get to this point in the album, The Cost, this is where you start to realize that, like the evaluation was the things you'd like to say to your manager, but you can't. And then this song, The Cost, is why the average person can't. You look at it and go, well, why don't you stand up for yourself and say what's on your mind? This song really encapsulates why that's the case. So let me go ahead and play this. I'm going to drop the camera off altogether. We will mute the mic as well, I think. That's a good idea. Probably should kill that as well. I didn't know that was even on, so that might be a problem. Hopefully that didn't kill the audio. The Pixel 5 was collecting. So let's see if I can do this.
Daddy, can we go to the carnival? Not today. Daddy hasn't gotten paid. Daddy, can you come to my football game? Sorry, buddy, Daddy has to work. Hey, Dad, let's go on vacation. Maybe someday when we can afford it. Can we visit family for the holidays? You guys can go, I have to work. Hey, Dad, wanna work on the car? Can't, son, I have to leave early. Hey, Dad, I asked my girlfriend to marry me. She said yes. That's great, son. Just remember, big weddings cost money. Dad never had enough money. Dad never had enough time. Always chasing one while losing the other behind. He missed the games, he missed vacations, he missed moments he can't get back. Spent his whole life working overtime, then finally found the time at his own funeral.
Mommy, can we get ice cream? Not today, sweetheart. Mommy hasn't gotten paid. Mommy, can you come to my concert? Sorry, baby. Mommy has to work.
Hey, Mom, we should take a vacation. It'd be nice if we could. Can we see Grandpa and Grandma for Christmas?
You guys can go.
I have to work the holiday.
Hey, Mom, can you help me bake a cake?
Sorry, kiddo, I have to leave early.
Hey, Mom, can you help with the wedding?
Sorry, babe, I have to work because big weddings cost money.
Mom never had enough money. Mom never had enough time. vacation. She missed moments she can't get back. Spent her whole life working overtime, then finally found the time.
At her own funeral, they spent their lives trying to buy more time and spent our lives trying to make more money. Every hour cost them something, every dollar cost us something. We have to ask ourselves, was it worth the cost? We'll never have enough money, we'll never have enough time. We'll spend our lives chasing both and still fall behind. So make the games, attend the concerts, take the vacations, visit your family while you can, because someday they'll all make time when all the games are over and all the concerts are done. The vacations won't matter anymore.
They'll finally find the time
To attend your funeral, is it really worth the cost? Daddy,
Can we go to the carnival?
So that is the cost, and it really is born out of that struggle that we face throughout all our lives between spending time with our families and finding the money. You know, that is a very uncredible dilemma where you're constantly fighting this time, trading your time for money, but having money. So it's like, man, you've probably heard people say, like, it'd be nice if mom or dad were home. But then when they're home, it's like, boy, it'd be nice if we could go on vacation, or we could do this special thing, but we can't because we don't have money. And so it kind of plays on that. And then it kind of asks the question, when you make those choices, it's not intended, and I'll prove this by the end of the album, it's not intended to say one or the other is wrong. So it's not intended to say, like, oh, if you are working all the time, earning money for your family, that's not necessarily wrong. Or if you're home with your family, but you know your child can't go to the carnival, or you can't go on that vacation because you don't have the money. The end result is the question that looms is it worth the cost? Is it worth whatever choice you make? When you look back on your life, will it be worth the cost? And this looks ahead to the final track in the album called Worth It, where I turn this whole song on its head and try to leave some confidence in the hearts of the people who are uncredible, that regardless of what decision they make, to stand behind it and embrace it, and don't get caught up in this. Like, I think we have a tendency, and this song kind of bears this out, to feel like we're not doing the right thing no matter what we do. And I wanted that struggle to be captured here. And it's emotional because I think average people who are in the workforce have this struggle where it's like, oh man, I just wish I could spend time with my family. And then, or if they don't have a job and they're with their family all the time, they're like, man, I just wish I had a little bit more money. And that dynamic pulls. And so that song kind of draws on that, and hopefully that reaches some people. Like I said, if you want to support getting the album out on like Spotify and Apple Music and things like that, this is going to be available to purchase. These tracks and the album is going to be available to purchase on Gumroad. I'll have a link in the description. Also, if you just want to listen to the songs right now before I get them on Spotify, they are accessible through a website called Suno, which is an AI-generated thing where you can go in and create these songs. If you want to make your own songs, you can go there, get an account with Suno, do that. They have an app and everything, so jump on there. Check those songs out, make your own songs. Still working through how to publish my own songs. I kind of know what I need to do. There's a little bit of a cost to it. And my thought was I'm hoping to let some of the tracks pay for themselves, but there's a part of me that thinks that if I just release this, I'll get enough through the Spotify watches, views, whatever that works. But we'll see. That is The Cost, track number 3 for the Uncredible album. The other 2 songs and that song, actually the whole album is on suno.com. So if you want to go there, and I think my username's Uncredible there. It's one of the few where my name is Uncredible. Usually my name is just Jeremy Lundmark is my tag, but I think for Suno I made it Uncredible specifically because I want that to resonate with the people who listen to it. I don't want them to think of me. I want them to think of a type of person with it. So yeah, that's all that I have for the Substack. Let's transition now and get into our weekly update. And I'm going to switch cameras for this because I have to read this off the notes. I just have to. It's just the way that it works. So let's get into our weekly update. All right, so it's been an interesting week. I'm double checking some things here on my monitor, make sure I'm hitting all my notes. Interesting week this week. This is taper week number 1 for the Halfway to the Holidays Marathon, which we already talked about. And so last Saturday would have been a long run, but I'm not doing long runs right now as I lean into this taper and trying to take the taper serious. I will say that I have the least amount of pain going into, like, residual training pain going into a marathon that I've ever had for a marathon. My first marathon, I had some very, I don't know if severe, but I had some very, I didn't think I'd finish my first marathon. I had some pretty serious pain in my right IT band, my outer knee. Don't think I had anything going into my winter half. I may have had some left hip problems going into that. I can't remember. And then going into the Buffalo Marathon, I was having these weird, like, shin splint / calf pains, as well as some inner thigh pain. So right now, my biggest issue is I'm having a little bit of right groin pain. So, and I think that's because I keep going too hard on some of these runs and too hard too long. But last Saturday I did 5 miles. I put in here fast because I think it would have been in the 9. It was sub 10, which for me at marathon pace, that's way too fast for me to be running at all. But I did it. Felt good. I felt great, and that's part of the problem with this. And then on Sunday I did 6.6 miles. I don't have a note here, so I think that was just an easy run. I want to say it was like a 11-minute pace, just taking it easy. And then Monday, I'm in a steps challenge at work, so I'm trying to get a bunch of steps. And on Monday, I did a 3.5-mile walk, followed by Tuesday, I did a 4-mile run at a 10-minute per mile pace. And this was another fast one. And keep in mind, I'm supposed to be tapering at this point. And I realized after Tuesday that I need to chill. Like, I mentioned this on my live feed with because Craig Lewis asked me how my training was going, and I'm like, I'm in what should be the easiest part of my training, and it's the hardest for me, and that's the taper, because I want to keep going. Leading up to my first marathon, I ran 10 miles on my bad IT band like 6 days before the marathon, and the guy who got me to sign up for it was like, no. And going into Buffalo, I was like, I need to give myself 2 weeks, and I was very happy that I took those 2 weeks, and here I am like a week and a half out from this marathon running 10-minute mile, 4-mile runs, like really pushing myself. And I just needed to chill. And luckily, I want to say luckily, I'll talk about air quality here in our news segment, but thankfully the air quality from the wildfires in Canada really deteriorated over the last week, and being out and running would not have been a good idea. So Wednesday I was sore from the 4-mile run on Tuesday, and I did a 3.5-mile walk, did the same thing on Thursday. And that day, I shared this on socials, that day specifically, the air quality, I get these air quality index notifications, and the scale is a 0 to 500. And I don't know what the air quality is normally. I have no idea. But the day that I went out, it was in the 200s, and I was like, wow, that's actually, I think it was in the 190s, to be honest. And when I was out there walking with no intention of running, I was like, I couldn't run in this. If you've ever been sitting by a campfire, and you had the wind blow towards you, and if you're in that situation, usually what people do is they'll kind of like close their eyes because it burns, and then they'll hold their breath for a minute and wait for the wind to shift, and then it blows away from you. But if it keeps blowing on you and you're just like, you're in the smoke, you'll grab your chair, pick it up, and move it to a different spot. And what walking on Thursday was like not being able to get your chair out of the smoke. It was like my eyes itched a little bit. It smelled pretty bad. And I did feel it in my chest. I don't have asthma or anything, but I could definitely feel the air quality, and you could see it too. I mean, I had a picture on Instagram of what it looked like. It's not good, man. It was definitely not good. And I'm going to talk about that air quality thing in our news topic, but I wanted to bring it up here because it really did affect my week of running, and I'm thankful that I wasn't in a heavy training period, because if I had been in a heavy training period, that would have been a problem. It would have been a problem. I don't think I would have been able to take deep breaths. It would have been tough. It definitely would have been tough. So basically what my week looked like was running too fast Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then basically actually I should say Saturday, Sunday, Tuesday, and then walking Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So I'm basically down to just walking. And the only reason I'm doing the walking, I probably shouldn't be doing anything but stretching and lifting. But the reason I'm doing the walking is I'm in this steps challenge at work, and if I win it, I can get a $100 gift card. So I won it last year. I intend to win it again this year. I am behind. So last year I won it with it's a 30-day challenge, and I won it last year with 700,000 steps in 30 days. Now, that was because, in large part, they did this during the 30 days that I ran my first marathon last October. Well, it was September into October. And so, unfortunately for the other competitors, you might say, I had 56,000 steps on one day. That's tough to beat. But I do remember 600,000 steps being kind of the range to win. So I'm in that ballpark. I'm probably going to just be under 600,000. I haven't checked it recently. I was on pace for 600,000 until, I want to say the beginning of, I don't know, I had a day last week or maybe the end of this week where I didn't even clear 10,000, which is very rare for me. I average anywhere from 15 to 18,000 steps a day. So what I do during these steps challenges is my normal running work routine, and then I'll throw in some steps here and there at work, or I'll add some extra steps after my run or before my run. In this case, I'm in a taper, so I'm actually supposed to be reducing my steps, but here I am increasing them. So, but anyway, my takeaway this week from the training block, as I go into kind of really just a half a week of taper, but I put on my notes, it's weird how tapering feels like a weakness or failure on a daily basis. Like, for me, this is one of the hardest parts of training. It's like, I don't know if it's my anxiety or the fact that I love the run so much, or what causes this, but when I don't run, I feel like I failed somehow, and it's not a healthy thing. I got to work through that, and I'm actually planning after. So this week I have my marathon. Next week I have my marathon on Saturday. The following Sunday I have a 10K. After that, I'm planning to dial back the running quite a bit. I may get into some mobility and lifting for a couple of weeks, because I think I saw someone else posted, it'll be around just over 90 days at that point to the Marine Corps Marathon, and I want to really take advantage of like a recovery period of like 3 to 4 weeks, and ease into a training block, and then an ease out of it. I want to this last training block was 9 weeks, and 2 of those weeks had to be like, I'm trying to think of the word and I can't think of it. 2 of those weeks are this taper, and it was hard to even taper because of it. And so really 7 weeks training, it's not enough for a marathon. It's one of the reasons they say you should only do like 1 or 2 marathons a year. I'm dumb. I just keep doing them. So whatever. But yeah, that's my takeaway, is that this is the hardest part of marathon training for me, is just dialing it back and believing that all this training is going to lead to, and combined with the recovery, will lead to a better result than just keep on running. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. I will say, like I said, I do feel better than I have going into my previous ones. I do plan to dial back even more the walking and the steps midway through this upcoming week, and then the marathon is on Saturday. So yeah, that's kind of like the week summary. This week will be pretty lame in terms of the week summary. By the way, with the marathon coming on Saturday, I don't know if/how this podcast is going to come out. Either I'll record Friday morning right before the marathon. I don't like that idea because the content of the marathon's kind of nice. Or it'll have to be Sunday morning, but I don't know how I'm going to feel after, that'll just be one day. So probably not a bad idea to do it Sunday, honestly. Or maybe I can do part of it. Maybe I'll do part of it on Saturday and part on Friday and part on Sunday and get both sides of that. But that's where I'm at right now. But yeah, that's our weekly update. And so, yeah. All right, now let's get into our uncredible take on what's going on in the news. And I had two things I wanted to talk about today. The first one, so I go through a couple of phases when I'm working on these episodes. And the first phase is like usually Tuesday or Wednesday, I'll start to realize that I don't have anything to talk about for certain sections. And this week was like that for the news segment. I was like, what am I going to talk about? And I mentioned this to Craig yesterday on our live feed that didn't get recorded. I don't want to talk about anything related to Charlie Kirk and that pretrial. I don't want to get into the Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro, Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson, all of that. I don't want anything to do with that. I do think I will discuss that down the road, but I don't listen to any of their podcasts regularly, and I don't get it. It almost seems like they are generating content off of attacking each other, and I hope it's working for them, but it seems like they're all in the same spiral of they were successful for a time and now they're reaching, specifically Candace and Ben. They clearly just need to get in a room together and sort it out. I'm not sure what the situation is between them. I know there's a history there, but man, all this stuff it's interesting. Well, just a minute ago, you see the break I had to throw in there. I go to switch cameras naturally, and the camera wasn't on because I let it sit too long. So, but yeah, no, the whole Candace Owens thing, Candace Owens, Megyn Kelly, Ben Shapiro, Candace specifically, it's almost like they're both losing viewership and they're both falling out of favor with their audiences, and they're just reaching. And like I said, it's just interesting to me how, they have a business model that was working and it's not working anymore. They're clearly not able to generate the viewership and things that they need. So they're kind of stuck. And you'd think they'd want to avoid it the same way I do. But like I said, I will talk about those subjects in the future, but right now I'm just not interested in it. Part of the reason I'm not talking about it is I'm not as invested in those subjects, the Charlie Kirk, etc., the breakup between Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro, just not interested in it. So anyway, the whole point of this conversation was I was struggling to come up with something to talk about. And then I wrote in my notes, these two things I wrote about were the death of Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell's. So like the weekend, the news going into the weekend and coming out of it was really weird because I think it was at the end of last week, we were hearing that Mitch McConnell was found unresponsive and Mitch McConnell might not make it, and there were even rumors that he had died. Then, somewhere along the way, he's fine. In fact, I haven't even looked this up. I probably should have. That's how uncredible I am. I believe by Monday, Mitch McConnell was, they had put out statements saying he was sick, but he's fine, and he's still going. But at the same time, we get news that Lindsey Graham, who had none of those issues leading into the weekend, had passed away. And the conspiracy theories started to fly about Lindsey Graham and his passing and the suspicion, I guess he was over in Ukraine, whether or not there was some foul play there, who knows. I didn't get that deep into it, but I will say the reason I wanted to talk about this initially was, and I've brought this up before in other podcast episodes, but we have in the United States of America specifically, we have an aging political class. Like I mentioned like 2 or 3 weeks ago that the time of boomers in leadership is coming to an end. And one aspect of that, those boomers being in leadership for so long, is this concern where we kind of need to get used to politicians passing away in office, like while they're in office, and dealing with that, because that's going to become a regular thing with all these people in office who are at the age that they're at. And it hasn't really been, thankfully it hasn't been an issue in the US, but it's got to be an issue going forward. And Lindsey Graham is just one of a large handful of senators, congressmen, House of Representative people in leadership, Trump included. You know, people are talking about, oh, Trump is on Iran's hit list or whatever, but it's like the man's if he's not 80, he's pushing 80. So the fact that he's on a hit list doesn't even matter. He could just die of natural causes tomorrow, just like Lindsey Graham did. And obviously the conspiracy theories would fly, but it shouldn't be a surprise to us when we're electing people who are of this age bracket for 4 to 6 year term limits. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense for us to be surprised when they pass away. But I put in my notes that we need to get used to politicians passing away if we're going to elect them at this age. And I put, this is one of the arguments I have for term limits. Now, some people are against term limits. I think there should be term limits, and I actually think the way that the term limit should work is I think it should be based on the average age of Americans, like the average age that an American passes away. I think that should be the standard by which a term limit is established. And so you could do that state by state too if you want to do an average of people who live in the state. But I think at a national level, Congress, House of Representatives, I think we should maybe every 10 years when we do a census or whatever the standard is, it doesn't really matter, but there should be a cutoff, not so much in how many term limits or how many terms you can serve, but rather a point at which age-wise it becomes a safety concern, so to speak, that you could pass away in office. And so if let's say you go to run for an office that is a 6-year elected role, and during that 6 years, like let's say you win and then you're going to be in office for 6 years, if during that 6-year period you reach the average age of an American passing away, I don't think you should be eligible for office. And I would love to hear an argument against that. But that would disqualify. It'd be cool for somebody to go through and do this. Maybe I should. Maybe I'd probably ChatGPT this at this point. But I wonder how many political officials right now would be disqualified if that were put into place. And basically the way I would see it working is you would have to pass the law, and then you would have to have a date at which it's enacted. So like the next election would be, like, obviously you wouldn't pull people out of their current offices that they were elected to, but their next one they would not be able to run. That's the way I think of it. And you know, I can understand the argument that might be come back to me on that, which would say, oh, well, then that's ageist and you're being unfair towards people of a certain age. Well, that's true, but we do have age limits on the front end for how old you have to be in order to run for Congress, president. Those age limits exist on the front end. So yeah, I mean, I don't understand why we don't have that bracket for national security reasons. And, you know, it's not only the fact that they could die in office. That right now that's a real concern, because a large portion of our political class could pass away, like, in 1 year. Like 1 year you could lose like I'm saying a large portion. I don't actually know, but I just in my head have this picture of how many are past the age of average age an American lives, and it's not good. But I put If long-term politicians die in mass in a short period of time, it's going to create a dangerous gap in leadership in our country that it's tough to fill the gap, first of all. But second of all, it also creates I want to say an intellectual gap, but a gap in how things run in general. Like, we're going to talk about it in our main topic here in a bit, but when someone gets a promotion or gets into a job who's never done that job before, it's nice to have some sort of transition into that leadership. Well, if you have politicians pass away in mass, that becomes harder to do successfully because the knowledge that they possess no longer exists. It goes with them. Now, obviously, there are staffers and that kind of thing. So maybe I'm overselling it, but my thought on it is you really create a gap that could be a problem at the political level, which then becomes a national security issue because we don't know how to interact with certain aspects of our government, and then we have to kind of like relearn it. But maybe there's guardrails there for that. I don't know. But my thought on the term limits and specifically the aging political class here in the U.S. is this is something we're going to have to get comfortable with and used to, unfortunately, if we're going to keep electing officials who are during their term, serving the term that they've been elected for, if they reach the average age of someone passing in the United States of America. So, but yeah, so that was like my first thought as to what I wanted to talk about today. And then the news and my own community got enveloped in this smoke from the wildfires in Canada. And so I thought I would talk about this as well because it did directly affect my community and me personally, and just give my thoughts on it. And you know what my thought is on it, and this is probably a crazy, uncredible take on these wildfires, is the conspiracy theorists jumped on Lindsey Graham's passing. They jumped on Charlie Kirk's situation. They've jumped on the Iran war. But nobody, not one person that I'm aware of, at least not mainstream, has looked at the message or the reason why on this air quality thing and even questioned the narrative, And it makes me wonder, like, you could do with what like the conspiracy theorists do with this. And I did this with my son the other day. I was like, what if it's not wildfire smoke? What if every so often they decide they're just going to burn a whole bunch of waste, landfill waste, plastics, whatever, and they decide they're just going to burn it, and then every now and again when they do it, the wind blows a certain direction and it hits a larger community. Like you could build a whole conspiracy theory around this. And all you would have to do is go, you could do what like Candace Owens does. You could be like, oh, this is just wildfires that they can't put out? What do you mean they can't put out? I was out there for an hour yesterday and it didn't smell like a campfire. In fact, there's no evidence that the smoke here in the state of New York was the same smoke that was coming from those wildfires. Why do we believe this? Like you could create a whole conspiracy theory around it. But what's interesting to me is that this could have the potential to be something that the government is lying about, and nobody's questioning it. And the other thing I noticed was some of the verbiage that was used as a warning with this air quality thing, which in the defense of Canada, because some people are mad at Canada for all, and I guess Minnesota, there's some other areas in the country where this is being affected, different wildfires are happening. But in defense of Canada, this has only lasted like a day or day and a half, so it hasn't been constant. But the messaging from the news on how to handle this, wear your mask and stay inside. And I'm like, that's their go-to now. Their go-to is stay inside and wear your mask. And the government is just dying to get us to stay inside. Now, I will say, the one day that I was out where it was really bad, I was like, yeah, I can kind of see it. But then the day after, so the air quality on, I want to say Thursday, the AQI, air quality index, was like 190s. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty high based on their rankings or whatever. And it was. Like, I was out there and I was like, whew, that's bad. So I go to work Thursday night, which was my Friday, because I work past midnight, so it ends up being Friday. My entire, the place where I work was, it's a manufacturing plant, was full of smoke. In fact, they said if you are having trouble breathing, go to medical, you can go home. They'll make accommodations. It wasn't horrible, but you could see the haze of smoke in the plant. When I left work that morning, there was just a haze over the parking lot. And that could have been like 50% fog, 50% smoke. I don't know. But I would say by noon, it was like a normal day. A light hint of this like smoke or residue, but I could see the sun in the sky just fine. Everything was kind of back to normal. But that morning going into about noon, the air quality index got as high as like 477, which is like max on that scale. It's like 20 points away from max. And by noon, it was back down to like 308 or something. Like, I don't know how they're judging it, like if they have some sort of way to judge it, but like where I was at, the actual feeling of like that index number versus how it actually felt outside, it did not correlate at all. And so I was telling somebody online when they saw that I walked 5 miles in the 450 air quality index, was like, how are you even breathing out there? And I'm like, it wasn't as bad today. So I don't know if there's a delay or if they're like, where they're running the test is not local to me, and so it's off a little bit. I'm not sure. But all that to say this, it's like, this is what I was thinking about. The day that I was walking and it was bad, like the smoke was bad. I was like, I grew up in this area. Never once in my life did I ever see or feel or recall this being an issue, this air quality thing. And now it's an issue. And if we didn't have the news or social media or this air quality index on our phones telling us what it is, I wonder what we would think. Like, I wonder what we would think about this whole air quality thing. Like, what is this? Like, you would have to look it up on the news or the radio, I guess, back then. But like, if nobody was telling us, it would be a very concerning thing, because we would think, what is this? Like, what's happening? It's like all of a sudden your entire world is covered in smoke. It would be much more concerning than with all this media coming at us. And then it got me thinking, like, they could really smoke us out. They could say like, oh, the air quality is super terrible and you have to stay inside for the next month, because, just like they did with COVID. And they could generate the smoke however they wanted to, For me personally, I wouldn't know the difference between if they bombed somebody like 500 miles away and that smoke was coming versus this supposed wildfire smoke. I wouldn't know the difference. Like, how would I know? Like, if the news right now was saying, Canada is testing nuclear weapons in the woods and I wouldn't know the difference. Like, I have no way of knowing that specifically. And that's why I say, like, it's ripe for conspiracy theorists to jump on, and they just didn't do it. So I just thought that was interesting with this air quality thing. I don't know. I have no idea, like, what the effects are. I was out probably the day that I shouldn't have been out. I was out there for like an hour, and I did feel the effects of it for the next day. But now it's pretty much normal outside. So I'm not sure what to think of it. It happens about once or twice a year now, where it didn't happen when I was a kid growing up. So who knows what the reason for it is. But yeah, my two main topics, my two main news articles this week, or main news topics that I wanted to talk about, were that smoke and the ever-aging politician in the U.S. So very interesting what the conspiracy theorists jump on and what they don't jump on. But overall, my uncredible take on both of those is, one, Americans are going to have to get used to older politicians passing away, because we're electing people who are well past the average age of death in America. So we shouldn't be surprised when this happens. It's going to leave a leadership gap. And with this air quality thing from Canada. I don't know how you fix it. I really don't. But I will say my uncredible take on it is it sucks and it's kind of annoying. It'd be nice if it wasn't the case, but it is. So I don't know of a way to clean it up. But it does concern me how easy it is for the government and the media to just say stay in your house and put your mask on. Not a huge fan of that since COVID. So yeah, that's my uncredible take on the news. Now let's shift gears here and let's go ahead and jump into our main topic. Now, our main topic this week is sort of I'm merging. I'm going to go ahead and merge the main topic and the podcast feature this week because at work this week, I've just been heavily reminded of how uncredible most of us are. And I came across this podcast and I was really listening to it seriously. Like I was really trying to understand this class of people. I'll just say this class of people because I don't even, no matter how I classify it, I'm probably going to rope in people that aren't really affected by it. But I wrote the song Evaluation, where it's sort of like from a worker's perspective, challenging the person who's evaluating them. And the places that I've worked over the years have been larger companies, not like small, 20-person, the business owner is the president, the person who started the business is the president, like where it's very intimate and close, just where companies that have been around for not hundreds of years, but like over 50 years, they're established, and now there's just layers of people doing management tasks, layers of people doing worker tasks, and this weird social dynamic that exists. Like I've just been thinking about it. I applied for a new position and went through an interview process, and I was just like, I don't know if it's just because I'm getting older, but I was just shaking my head because I was like, this is not professional. Like none of this makes any sense to me. And I'm not going to get into the details of what happened at my work, but what it got me down was this rabbit hole of like what is going on, and how do we resolve this dynamic or this dichotomy between what I promote and push, which is the uncredible, and then those people who I perceive as putting them down, who consider themselves credible but aren't. There's this weird pressure, and sometimes it exists, sometimes it doesn't, but most of the time there's this like person who has been a hard worker who gets the job done, and then there's this other person who's over them. That weird social dynamic where there's levels of people, but the people themselves, it's like if not for titles and salaries and weird check boxes, they're not equals in terms of skill or work. But because of titles and work structures, people who are unskilled or not as skilled in a particular task somehow find their way above the other person. It's weird. And I was thinking a lot about that this week, and I got into this podcast called The Business Fix is what it's called. And I did not write down. I'll put in the show notes if I remember the names of the people who are hosting it. But what I did was I grabbed a couple of clips from this, and we'll see if we can pull this off. And I want to go clip by clip, and I just want to look at some of the clips from this podcast. They've got over 50 episodes, but it doesn't look like, maybe depending on, I looked at them on YouTube and on Spotify, and they didn't look huge. Like they didn't look like a gigantic podcast. It still looks like a smaller podcast, but they've got over 50 episodes, and it's two people who are in leadership, and you're seeing their honest perspective on how to lead well. And I appreciated it because it doesn't reflect a lot of the things that I've seen over the years. Like I said, I think I've shared that I've worked in like 20 plus different jobs, and I've seen all kinds of crazy stuff. And maybe the reason I want to share these clips is because I want managers who are in those roles to maybe see it and go, oh, that's how we should act. Because I've seen so much bad versions of this. Now, there's some elements of this that I'm going to push back on, but this would be these two talking about these business situations from a management position. This would be the ideal scenario if your boss, your manager, your leader in your workplace acted at least on some level like they say they do. And we take their word for it, but it would be nice to know that leadership that you have is listening to this for advice, because a lot of times when I've been in meetings and been talked to by leaders, I'm just like, this is not the attitude that I see. And if it was, I probably would have a lot less frustration about it. So this is my first time trying this, so bear with me. I have a plan on how to make this work, but I'm going to try to limp through this. So this first clip is just talking about hiring your friends. So let's see if I can pull this off. Here we go.
Is it ever okay to hire or promote a friend over a more qualified stranger?
Only if the evidence supports it. Friendship is not a qualification.
No, I like them.
Or friends. A recipe for disaster is when you promote or you hire. I just like them.
I've seen it.
I have too, and it never ends well.
Is it ever?
So I shared this first to give you an idea of what the podcast, like what the interaction is like, but also something that should be obvious, but we see it all the time in corporate world of managers who hire their friends to be leaders, and you sit there and you go, how is that allowed? And I can't tell you. I mean, I've worked for, I should go back and check, so I'm not saying, I know 20 is at least the number that I've worked for different companies. And the longer you work for a company, and we'll talk about this here when we get to our third clip, but you start to see things like this and scratch your head and go, is that how it works? Like, is that, and you wonder, like, I had this week. I really struggled with it this week because I was like, generally speaking, I question the motives of companies and what's going on. And I had it a lot this week, and I was watching these clips going, see that? Like, watching that clip, I go, like, no duh. Like, that should be obvious. And yet I'm looking at a corporate world where over the years I've watched companies just hire their friends and cycle through their buddies, and they find ways to make it work so that it passes the HR test. I think the one lady in this podcast is I think her company provides HR services to smaller businesses. I think that's the whole point of her company. So her perspective is really, really interesting on this. But we've all seen it, right? And that's the fact that they can share this clip as a short, and at least me personally, but I'm sure a lot of people resonate with it and go, yeah, I've seen situations where it's like this guy hired his brother-in-law's friend and they hang out together all the time. And, you watch these people move up, and it never, like she said, it never ends well. And I put in my notes, I've seen it all the time, and it's such a cancer to the business because people see that and they make a mental note that their performance won't ever get them there because that person doesn't look at performance. They don't measure based on performance. And the evidence we have is right in front of us, and I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where a company was doing this, but I remember I worked for a company, it was like 2016, and the last thing I did before I left ministry was I completed my master's degree. So I had that, but it's always been a weird thing where I have this master's degree in ministry. It doesn't apply to the corporate world, but at the same time, it is a master's degree. So it has some crossover, and it always raises the attention of the hiring people. And I remember I put in for a management role at this job. I was a temp, but they said we could apply. So I applied, and I went in there, had a great interview. I thought the interview went phenomenally. And then they turned around and just hired I think it was the son-in-law, if I remember correctly, the son-in-law, who was already in line for it. for the job. They had already kind of like paved the way for it, and they gave him the job. And then I realized like how stupid it was of me to even apply for it, knowing that they had already paved the way for this family member, really, but it was like a extended family member, to get the job. And what these companies will do is they'll be like, oh, well, he's your family member, so you can't be a part of it, to put on this perception of, to make it seem like they're being objective in the process when they're definitely not being objective. So if you've ever seen that, it's gross to be a part of. But okay, so let's pull up this clip number 2. Okay, there we go. Yeah, the weird thing about doing this is the clip starts playing automatically, and I gotta refresh it before I bring it over into the main screen. But the second clip, it talks about letting employees go, but the tail end of this clip is what struck me as interesting, because it's something that I rarely, if ever, have seen in the workplace. So let me hit refresh, and then we'll bring this over. There we go. Perfect.
You do not need to be robotic in this. You also don't let emotion erase the reality of where things are. You cannot get hijacked. At Clarity, this is why we lean so heavily into documentation, documented coaching, so that you cannot get emotionally hijacked, because here's the data. Here are the clear expectations, because that's the other, well, did I set them up for success? Maybe you didn't. But if you didn't, let's make sure that we have it documented, but then let's put some clear expectations in place either now and put them on a performance improvement plan, or let's exit because we know that it's not going to work, and the next person that comes in has to have clear expectations. You do not need to be robotic in this. You also
Sorry, I let that play again because the audio was turned off on my side. But so what stood out to me about this was, I think her company is called Clarity. But what stood out to me about this clip was this tail end of this, where she talks about having clear expectations in this performance improvement plan. And I can't tell you the number of companies that I've worked for where they don't set clear expectations for any role. And then when it comes time to do like a mid-year review or an annual review, you have no standard to measure yourself against. And then you start going through the motions of, well, corporate wants managers to do these reviews. But the managers haven't been, like, for somebody who works third shift, most of my career, I don't see managers. They don't see the work that I do. They can't judge me. They can't assess me. And so they hand that responsibility off to the workers, and they have the workers interact with each other. The managers collect all that data and then hand it back to HR. They polish it up a little bit. But none of it's done with expectations. And so what this does is it puts a veil over this fog, smoke, right? Smoke from Canada. Puts this veil over this raise process. In this particular video, they were talking about the like measuring someone's performance, but it's like, if you don't have that objective standard, then I don't know as an employee if I'm going above and beyond. And so then when my manager doesn't like me and gives me a bad review, but not based on objective, they just don't like me, and they don't have objective reasons why, and there's no rubric to measure. Like let's say employee 1 comes to work every single day and is never late, punches in on time, but he's kind of lazy when he's there. And employee B, man, a couple times this year he was late. One day he had to call off sick, like last minute, left us hanging. But that was 4 days out of the year, right? Let's say he called in late, or was late 3 times and called off once. So there's 4 days in the whole year that we had these, you would say, attendance problems. But when he's here, man, he's a killer. Right, he puts out twice as much product as the next person, but he's got this issue. So it's like, which one of these people would you rather have, right? Personally, I'd rather have the person who has the attendance issues. We can work around that. However, a lot of companies, when they don't have like a rubric for this, would look at the lazy employee who punches in every day on time. Doesn't do jack diddly while he's there. And you all know this employee. I'm not describing some fictional person, because as I tell you this story, you're like, oh, that's Bill, Bob, Steve, Jim. Like, Sally, whatever. I just named all men, which was interesting. But like, who I'm talking about. Like, that person, either currently or in your past, you've seen them, you've interacted with them, and you know what I'm talking about. that person gets away with it, and then they get a good review. But then when it comes time to do a performance review on the guy who's just like the best worker, but man, he was late that one time, and he called off last minute and left us hanging for that one shift, that guy gets beat up in his review, and then he gets discouraged because he's killing himself. But, you know, he's probably killing himself. He's probably working that hard because he wants to perform well because he's got some tough family situations, or maybe he's struggling financially, and that's like the reason he was late those days might have been he didn't have money for gas in the car, so he's struggling. Where this 20-year employee who's figured out how to be lazy all the time knows how to punch in on time, but he doesn't do anything when he's there. It's like these are the realities that emerge, and when you don't have clear expectations of job performance, you can't meaningfully critique that employee that's lazy but punches in every day. And what I found is like these major companies that I've worked for, these big corporate companies, they all end up leaning on team interaction. Does your team like you? And they don't assess that themselves. They have the team do that. And I've even seen this. I've even seen managers who didn't like an employee. They had the authority to give peer reviews to people that also didn't like that employee, or to employees that did like them, and then they could get positive interaction or positive feedback. You know, they knew how to manipulate the system that way. But again, all that goes back to having a clear expectation that a person can hit. And what's unfortunate, she talks about a performance improvement plan, or a PIP. What's unfortunate is that standard usually doesn't exist until the person's in trouble, which most floor employees, when you start hearing performance improvement plan, you're in trouble, right? You're in trouble at that point. It's like it would be nice to have those guardrails in place ahead of time so that you could objectively assess the situation. Because what I've seen most of the time is that your hardest, best workers get frustrated and end up having team conflicts because of the people who are lazy but reliable, and they carry those people. And those people will tear up the team. And because the manager is not involved that closely with the team, there's enough of those lazy reliables that they can just keep pushing out those hard, and those hard workers keep coming, right? We keep hiring new people who are like trying to prove themselves, and they try to prove themselves, and then they have this team dynamic issue with those people. Those people win out, and the cycle starts out. And it all goes back to not having clear expectations of job performance, not just attendance performance, but actual job performance. So let's get into our third clip here. So I'm going to give a little bit of pushback on them on this one. I thought this was hilarious because nothing captures the distance between the uncredible floor worker and the credible leader than this clip here. And it's a subtle thing, but I'm hoping that if you're a leader who watches this clip, and then when I give my critique of it, I'm hoping you go, oh, that's what they see. So let me hit refresh. Here we go. Oops. Well, I gotta do that differently. There we go.
You've got to be able to separate identity from position. People often hear this role isn't working as I'm failing as a person. This is not an assault on your character or humanity. You are not right for the role. So feel like you can value someone deeply and still know the role isn't right. And role ending is not a human worth judgment. What about you?
It becomes very simple for me. I'm like, look, I understand that. And I appreciate that. We're talking about the job here. This is not a role that is currently fitting what you're doing. I don't want to say putting the blame on the machine instead of the person, but look, you're not the right part to fix this machine.
No.
You do not take a oil filter off of a Honda and try and stick it on a Chevy. It doesn't work.
You've got to be.
So they're talking about, they call it role ending, but they're talking about removing somebody from their role in their job and how that can be difficult. And I do like how she talks about separating the role from the identity. They also have, it might be even in the next clip, I'm not sure. There was one clip I had, I think I got rid of it, but where she talked about sometimes when you keep somebody in a role that they're not fit for, you're holding them back from finding what they are fit for. So in that respect, I appreciate this conversation because I do think that leadership in general does struggle with making the separation clear so that the employee understands that. But what stood out to me about this, and I know this is petty, but people are petty. His illustration, he said, he used this illustration, which I am sure from a leadership standpoint, from people who don't do manufacturing, who don't work on their own cars or change their own oil, he goes, it's nothing personal. It's just that you don't put an oil filter from a Honda on a Chevy. And I'm like, my immediate reaction. Now listen, I fact checked myself just to make sure I didn't make an idiot of myself when I said this. But for anybody who is uncredible, like us regular folk, who don't sit in office jobs and deny people roles, for us, we hear that and we go, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know what he's talking. Now, he might know what he's talking about in this context, but his illustration makes him totally goofy to an average person who changes their own oil. And the reason for that is, yeah, you can. There's probably plenty of Honda filters. In fact, I'm not even going to say there's probably. I know for a fact that there are Honda filters because I looked it up, but there are Honda filters that you can put on Chevys and vice versa. It has to do with thread pitch and whether the seal lines up. And so when you say something like, you don't take one from this and put it in this, it's like, you don't, like the floor guy. Now listen, it sounds like I'm nitpicking, and I am. But I can tell you right now that his whole message in that clip hinges on whether or not that's true and whether or not the people he's communicating to know whether or not that's true. And as somebody who has owned, a lot of old junk type cars and done a lot of work on his own cars, those of us who are like that have all been in the position where we went to the big book at Advanced Auto Parts or in Walmart, and we've gone through to find our filter, and we found that over the years we've had to use the same filter on two different cars. So his illustration, it really magnifies this dichotomy between uncredible and credible, and it really gets to the heart of what I mean when I talk about uncredible. Because when I first started to discover this difference, it was like I was in an academic world gaining accolades that the academic world could appreciate, while going to work in a factory where they could care less about those accolades. And so his message in this clip probably resonates with people in leadership. They're like, oh yeah, you can't, it's a part and you can't switch parts. But to the average guy who changes his own oil, the people they employ, they're going, yeah, you can. What are you talking about? There's a lot of Honda filters that go on Chevys and vice versa. What are you talking? Now, obviously, his message is still valid. When you're trying to let somebody know that they've lost their role, and the reason for that is they're not a good fit for that role, great. But his illustration totally, it hits this specific conflict that he loses credibility with the people he's removing the roles from when he does this. And this is where this dichotomy is or this difference, this distinction that I'm bringing up when I talk about uncredible, credible, professional, unprofessional, however you want to describe it. This is a perfect illustration of, because the people he interacts with on a regular basis are going to sit there and go, wow, that's a good point. It's a great way to think of it. And the people that are underneath him, that are below him, so to speak, are going to go, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about at all. And so his whole message gets marred, and he's probably going to get good feedback from the people who don't change their own oil. The people who do, probably the people he's going to disqualify for these roles, are going to go, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about anyway. He doesn't even know how oil filters work. But that separation is where we get to the heart of what uncredible is, because what he's saying, the uncredible want manager like this who's going to say, look, you're a valuable person. We're going to try to find where you fit, right? So you're not the right oil filter for this car, right? So same illustration, slightly modified in how I'm saying it. We're going to try to put you on a car that you fit. The seal on this oil filter isn't lining up. So we're going to put you're not a bad oil filter. There's something wrong with you. You could have 3 Fram oil filters, but if it doesn't seal properly or it doesn't thread on properly, now the illustration makes sense to that guy on the floor, because I'm talking like I know what I mean. Like, I know what I'm saying. And so the message gets lost when he says that illustration to the person. And this is what's so critical, to the person he's trying not to offend. So when you say, oh, it's nothing personal, it's not just because you're losing this role, you can't put a Honda filter on a Chevy. And he's like, this guy's thinking, yes, you can. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. That's what's going on in the back of his mind. But if he'd have just changed that illustration a little bit, and again, is it petty? Yeah, but I'm just, for this person, and this is where I feel like I'm unique because I can see both sides. For this person, for this guy who's doing this podcast, I do wonder, because I've heard some of his background in some of his other episodes. I think he may know a little bit. I wonder if, like, when this was over, he's like, oh, that illustration could have done better with that illustration, but at the same time, somebody went and clipped it and made it a clip and not just part of the episode. So a better way to put it is, this filter, you could have 2 Fram oil filters that you try to put on and they both thread on, but the seal is in the wrong spot. That would make way more sense. And then you're describing, because what he's trying to do is relate to that person with that illustration. And what he does actually is he increases the divide. So I thought that was very interesting. But again, to the Uncredible, who might be sitting there like jaded that they're being denied this role by this guy who doesn't even know how to change his own oil or doesn't understand how oil filters work, to that Uncredible person, I will say you do want this guy as your manager. Like, this is the type of person that you want telling you this, because there are some managers who wouldn't even think about this, and they would be like, look, dude, you're not qualified for leadership at all. Your place is on the floor, and that may be true. That might actually be true. But when you're trying to find a perfect fit for somebody, you want somebody who's going to actually care how you feel and look at your worth. And these two seem to do that. I will say that this next clip, I think it's this next clip, I'll point this out, but some of the things they're talking about are used by leaders to sound like they're faked, like they're performative. So they'll do these things as if they saw this podcast, like, oh, somebody who cares about somebody says it like this, right? And so their heart seems to be in the right place from this podcast, which is why I'm sharing it. But I will say that I know for a fact that there are leaders who take this leadership advice and then spin it as sort of a manipulative thing to be like, oh, how can I hide that I'm, and they'll start documenting when they want to get rid of you. Like she talked about clarity and documentation, or the manager might hate this guy and think he's a jerk, but then he's going to use this terminology with this oil filter to make him feel like oh, this isn't personal. You're just not the right fit. Like, oh, okay, sure, buddy. So there is that happens too. All right, let's get into our final clip here. Clip number 4. Let's see here. Make sure one of these clips I pulled up, the audio wasn't properly set up. Okay. Let's do refresh, drag. Here we go.
Promotion signal value, so the team learns what matters by watching who advances. So it's not just about who you keep or who you let go. It's about who you elevate.
100%. Directness, I found, also prevents drama. We're pretty low drama here at Pedal Stomper.
Yes, you are.
Tell the team exactly why someone is promoted. They hit X metrics, filled Y skill gap. We're looking forward to this. If you just leave it open, people are going to fill in the blanks on their own.
Promotion signal value, so the team learns what matters by.
So I love this clip because it's people in this role acknowledging that the workers see, she says promotion signals values. So you could say, oh, here at this company, we value X, Y, or Z. So it's like, let's use safety as an example. If you say that our number one priority here at our company is safety, but you've heard or for a fact that that company has had, 25 injuries, people who've been injured there and how they swept the safety issue under the rug. Like, it's like your what you've done is signaling what really matters. And what she points out here, what they both point out in this clip, is that when you promote the wrong people, you promote people in general. I don't even say the wrong people. When you promote people, that signals to everyone else what you care about. And if you're promoting people who aren't the best workers or who don't have the performance, that people see that and they go, oh, it doesn't matter how I live or how I work. They don't care about that. That's not what they're promoting. And I've worked for companies. I have worked for companies that they don't care at all about performance. It's all just my friend, your friend, my relative, his relative, your friends with my daughter. Like, all of that is way more important. And I love the fact that they emphasize the documentation aspect of it, because that's often so lacking. And I put this in one of my other comments, but I've noticed that most managers that I've dealt with, they don't want to have like performance expectations documented, because it's not only makes work for them, but it also puts guardrails on the employees. And those are good guardrails, but it also puts guardrails on them that dictate to them how they need to operate. A lot of the managers I've worked with or worked for, they don't like that. What I put in my note was, I found that most managers don't want this, because as much as it puts expectations on employees, it puts expectations on them. And so if you have expectations and you have standards and you do document, guess what? You probably won't be able to hire your friend, because your friend won't be meeting those expectations. So, or maybe vice versa. But I think what managers want is they want to be in a role where they can do what they want. I do think there's a control aspect to it. And the second you start setting expectations, you are bound by the expectations you create. Now, a good manager's fine with that, because they created those expectations. They're still in control. A bad manager doesn't want those expectations, because they want to be able to control. Like, let's put it this way. I'll do both sides of it. They want to be able to fire who they want to fire and hire who they want to hire, promote and demote who they want, whenever they want, for whatever reason they want. That's what they want, right? And the second they start putting expectations and standards, people can begin to chase those. And so you might set an expectation and go, I want a person in this role that does X, Y, Z. And then somebody you don't like, that you don't want working for you, that you don't want to promote, starts doing X, Y, and Z. And so objectively, they're the right person, and you don't like that because you don't like that person. And I've seen so much of that in the corporate world that it's unfortunate. So that's our main topic. And what I put is, when I look at life through an uncredible lens, and I share these clips from this podcast called The Business Fix, I put, working in a corporate world for a large company can be surreal at times. When you strip away all the titles and look at it objectively, it becomes a really weird social game. And that's just been sort of my journey this past week, and that's why I talked about it today, is when you step back from the facade that is corporate world, and you realize that we're all just people, it gets really weird. It gets really weird. You start to see right through all of it. And it's, well, like I said in that note, or in my uncredible, looking at life through an uncredible lens, when you strip all this stuff away, it's really weird. And if it would be great if people use documentation and set clear expectations and it was objective and measurable. But the reality is, in all the places I've worked, I say all the places, most of the places I've worked, that hasn't been the case. That's not been my experience. And I think I saw an episode where, I don't know about the woman in this podcast. I should have looked up their names. That's my bad. I don't know the woman's name, but I did see some clips where the man has been through a lot of jobs, sounded similar to me, where he's seen a lot of dark stuff. And I could relate to him in that sense. And I think his experience has gotten him to where he's at today, where he's like, I've seen people do stuff like this and it's gross. It seemed like she's kind of been doing what she's been doing for a long time in the HR world, but sort of like a service of human resources. And it seems like her experience is more, I've seen this go bad. Not so much her experience, like it's been done poorly to her, but she's seen it be done poorly and tries to avoid it. So, but his experience seemed very similar to mine. I didn't hear too much of it, but I am merging this with the podcast feature this week. So this is going to count as our podcast feature as well. So check them out. I'll put them in the show notes. It's called The Business Fix. And, for the podcast feature, what I am genuinely trying to do is I'm genuinely trying to keep it with smaller podcasts. This is a very well done podcast, but it still seemed small to me, and I think the information was valuable. So that's going to conclude both our main topic and the podcast feature for this episode. All right, now let's get into our quote of the week. And you know what I'm excited about with the quote of the week? This is the first time, I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning, I can't remember, but I did spend money for the first time on the podcast this week. And so last week I started using OBS Studios, which allows me to do all these transitions and, like here, I'll just do it so you can see. So like I can do this in OBS Studios without even, like that transition I just did, I can do that in OBS Studios without even doing anything in a video editor. So, but I'm excited because last week I was just using the one camera, so I had to edit this in. But for the first time, I can actually hold this up and see exactly where it's hitting and hit it dead center. So this is our quote of the week this week. Running changes your body and your mind. Invest in yourself. Running changes your body and your mind. Invest in yourself. And I'm always looking at these quotes and trying to decide, I have a week, I have a whole calendar. I've shown you guys this before for the year. It's halfway done. It's getting kind of sparse. And I go through them each week and I try to decide which one of these quotes do I want to go with. And this one really hit me because this has been my journey with walking and then running. And it's this reality that running does change your body. If you get into running and you start developing yourself in that way, it will change your body, but it also does something to your mind. It puts your mind through intentionally stressful situations. And you could probably get this with weightlifting, sports, whatever. You could probably get it in any of those ways. But running specifically, it changes your body, but it also changes your mind in a positive way. And every time you go a little bit faster, a little bit harder, a little bit further, and you wrestle with your mind in that way, you're not only strengthening your cardio and your leg muscles, you're strengthening something in your mind. And David Goggins, Cameron Haynes, they both talk a lot about this. You grow from it in a very tangible way. And so this ends with invest in yourself. And I think that's a great way to also wrap up this episode is, listen, find something you can do that does in fact change your body in a positive way, but also that changes your mind and makes you a better person overall. Running does that. And I do want to say that if you listen to people who talk about running marathons and half marathons and you go, I could never do that, I want to encourage you, yes, you could. Yes, you can. And say, listen, just get out and start running 1 mile. And if you say, oh, I can't even run, I have this issue or that issue, then walk. Walk 1 mile every day. Just start walking 1 mile. And, I look back on my own personal journey with running. And my journey started with walking. At 240 pounds, I was walking 1 mile every day. 6 years later now, I run marathons. I am a marathon runner. I remember when I ran my second marathon at the end of May. And I thought, I just went from, even though both of my marathons have been over 5 hours, nothing to brag about, I thought to myself, I am now a marathoner. Like, I am a marathon runner. And that was profound to me to think about, given the fact that as a kid, I never ran, never liked running. It wasn't something I was interested in doing. And now in my 40s, I'm calling myself a marathoner legitimately. Now, hopefully, my next marathon, which is coming next Saturday, 1 week away, hopefully, when I get there, I will be able to say I'm not just a marathoner, but I am a sub 5 hour marathoner. That'd be cool. But for right now, I'm happy to say that I'm just an uncredible marathoner. All that to say is you could go from being somebody who is a walker to a runner just by walking, just by getting out there and walking. So I just encourage you, I love this quote, running changes your body and your mind. Invest in yourself. Find something, whether it's lifting weights, running, walking, exercise, whatever. Find something you like, do it, and invest in it. Carve out that time. It's important to invest in yourself. And those benefits will be far more valuable than anything else you could be investing in. And I think if you start there, investing in yourself physically and mentally, you'll see those return on investments hit your workplace, your finances, your family, and all those other things. So just highly encourage you with that. Again, running changes your body and your mind. Invest in yourself. All right, let's go ahead and close things out. Thanks again, as always, for listening to the Uncredible Podcast. Remember to subscribe at the Substack at uncredible.me. I always like to remind people that the Substack, it's got like two sides to it. So if you get the app, you can see some posts. They have what's called notes, and those are just like posts, basically, like a Facebook post or a Twitter post. I put my runs on there. You can see those, some short videos I'll throw on there as well. But also the articles, this podcast, that stuff all pops up on there as well. So get on there, subscribe to the Substack. It's free. You just got to throw your email in there. Or if you have the app, you can just subscribe it'll just attach your account with Substack to it. So if you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, like and subscribe the episodes. It's important that you do both because, if you subscribe to the podcast and that's it, then there's no further interaction. So if you just watch it but you don't like it, it doesn't tell the algorithm that people are listening and boost it. And, like Craig Lewis and I talked about yesterday when we tried to do the live feed, we really need to, as average uncredible people, support one another and put this stuff out there and try to grow these accounts, not for my sake or for Craig's sake, but for the sake of the average person to have an opportunity to get their voice out there. So for Uncredible merch, this is like the second time. I was doing the clips, and we'll do a little switcheroo here. I was doing the clips, and I noticed that there was a couple of weeks where I did switch out from Uncredible merch, but this shirt, how do I go through this way? Okay, do the work. This is one of my favorite shirts I've ever purchased. I got it from $6shirts.com. I'm no problem promoting them. For a couple of years, they had a deal where you could get like 10 shirts for $50, and this was one of the ones I got. This is actually from my extra large days when I had extra large, but do the work. Really love that. I'd like to get something like that in an Uncredible shirt, but yeah, we're not wearing Uncredible merch today. If you want to get this shirt, just go to $6shirts.com. But if you want Uncredible merch, go to merch.uncredible.me, and you can get there. I will say this, and I've mentioned it before. If you want to be the least disappointed in the product, get the active shirt and try to get a discount through Redbubble. So all the products come through Redbubble. The designs are uploaded, and then they do the work. They do great work. They put out a pretty good product, but I've had the best luck now with the active t-shirt. It's a bit more expensive. I think it runs anywhere from like $28 to $30. But if you get a discount, like right now, I have a 40% off. They roll, like if you go to their website, they throw discounts at you all the time. But get it on discount. You get like a t-shirt for $20, and I know that's pricey, but what's good about it is those shirts, I know they last. So I have one that I honestly think I screwed it up because I was very consistent with turning it inside out when I washed it, and I think I screwed it up by leaving it right side out. I think that might be what ruined it. It didn't ruin it, but like all my shirts that were the active t-shirt have stayed. They look great, and I'm over a year now on them. But that one just got beat up, and I think it was from the wash. But I run in them, I do all that stuff, and all my activities I do in them fairly regularly, and the other two have held up really good. That the one has kind of started to crack, and the logo. In fact, this one's that way, but the logo started to crack. But the rest of them have stayed pretty good. So if you're going to get a t-shirt, I'd recommend you get the active t-shirt. The cotton shirts that I've gotten faded fairly quickly. The sweatshirt I got, which I'll be wearing that again this winter. It's a picture of a wolf for the Uncredible Beach Challenge I did, and the wolf started to peel off. It's just a sweatshirt thing. So if you're interested in just daily updates and things like that, follow me on Instagram at Jeremy Lundmark. Most of my socials are at Jeremy Lundmark. All the links will be in the show notes. As always, thanks for watching and listening, and remember, stay uncredible.
We are the night shift, swing shift, day shift, no quit, no quit, no quit. Building their world while they talk about us, talk about us, talk about us. experience. Still not credible. So we embraced it. Now we're uncredible.